still want you back. Yeah.
Where do you go when you reach the top? Literally anywhere else, answered our four emo giants as they began to work on their weirdest, wordiest, and most wonderful projects to date. The albums we are about to dive into now are almost universally my favourite from each of the bands, as they branch out and show what they were really capable of. A spectacular stream of 60s flower power hippie rock, an introspective meditation on the polarising forces that control the modern world, an album that asks how one can even keep their faith alive when everyone around them is pushing them to their limits, and a super Japanese desert dance party, baby. Oh yeah, it's about to get weird.
To exaggerate a memory or two.
It's the end of the electric guitar era, proclaimed Ryan Ross as he set his guitar on fire in his back garden. Panic didn't quite know where they were going next, they just knew they wanted to play anything but the same 13 songs. They also didn't want to talk about how hard it was to be rich, famous and on tour. However, Ryan did want to talk about the people he'd met whilst on tour, such as a homeless guy in Scotland and a blind accordion player in London that had inspired him. The band retired to an honest-to-goodness cabin nestled in the hills of Nevada to start work on a concept record called Cricket and Clover about two lovers of the same name. Their story would take place in a mixed reality, neither future nor past, and act as a modern fairy tale. The songs would be completely free-flowing, having no choruses and leading into each other. They were apparently dominated by keyboards and synths, and used none of their normal instruments. Ryan had been listening to numerous film scores at the time, and had even wanted Danny Elfman to produce. While this concept was partly the brainchild of a brilliantly creative group of musicians, it probably also came about due to the fact that in the cabin with the band was a shit ton of psychedelics. The presence of shrooms probably led to the aforementioned guitar burning, as well as Spencer suggesting that he build a hybrid drum kit out of glass and crates and cartons. Needless to say, the band started to get a bit of cabin fever after a while, despite having their own private spaces and adequate facilities there. Having worked on it for a substantial amount of time, and with every pop-punk news outlet worth their salt trying to get the scoop on what Panic's next album would be, we do actually have quite a few leaked names of songs. These include There Once Was a Man from Nantucket, I Don't Have a Shirt But I Got a Hat, Folkin' Around, although it bears no relation to the song of the same name on Pretty Odd, and Fill Me Up and Porridge that were meant to flow into one another. We also got to hear a couple songs, such as the original demo for Nearly Witches, which appeared on the Citizens FOB mixtape. Its instrumentation remains pretty similar to the version that would eventually end up on Vices and Virtues, however the chorus is structured differently, and Ryan's lyrics instead talk about cutting family ties. There was also the song It's True Love, which was played at a few live shows, however even as it was debuted, it seemed unlikely to the band that it would make the final album. I have to say from the little we've heard about what the album was shaping up to be, although I'd obviously like to hear it just to see what it was like, I'd hesitate to call it a lost masterpiece. It's True Love is noticeably subpar, being very repetitive in the lyrical department and the piano lead not being particularly powerful. I think the record probably would have ended up being too abstract in a negative way, probably not being able to maintain focus on its core fairy tale idea for very long before going off on some drug-based tangent. But look at me go critiquing an album that doesn't exist. Eventually, either the band or the powers that be made the decision for it to never see the light of day. On the creative end, Ryan said that the songs were too ambiguous and that he couldn't come up with an ending for the story. And while some sources claim that the album was far off from completion, the idea that they just couldn't come up with an ending and Ryan's estimates that they were 3/4 finished paint a different story. And first off, I'd just like to say on behalf of everyone, why would you say that and then not leak the goddamn tapes? While some people involved have tried to temper fan expectations, saying there isn't a holy grail of master tapes anywhere, others have said that hard drives definitely exist, with John Walker saying that he has a bunch of demos within the past couple of years.
Man, quit playing with me, man. No, for real, don't play like that.
Let's just hope I live another couple of decades until they finally get their act together and do some anniversary release. Well, what a debacle that all was. The only other new music we got from Panic during this time period is the criminally underrated It's Almost Halloween, which is a staple of my Halloween playlists. The music video may be bit crushed to death, but it's brilliant to see the band doing strange Monster Mash style dances to this brilliant catchy song. And so we finally reached the development of Pretty Odd. After experimenting with synths and psychedelics, the band more than anything just wanted to write simple fun songs, and do more psychedelics. And thus 9 in the Afternoon came about as their first song written for the record. The band dropped the exclamation point from their name and traded in their top hats and ruffles for vests and ascots. The boys were about to take on the world once again, this time with flower power. We're So Starving is a fun tongue-in-cheek start to the album, and Ryan described it as one of the most straightforward songs the band had written up to that point. Once again it catches the audience up to speed on where they'd been, and where they were at as a band, still the same. The title 9 in the Afternoon comes from something Spencer said randomly while under the influence that the band all found funny, money, and the whole song was subsequently written in around 7 hours. The song sarcastically responds to critics, talking about how they've been picking up things, reviews, they shouldn't read, and melodramatically stating that it's the end of the world, when they insist that their career is over. The song was the lead single for the record, and had a music video where the band all wake up in bizarre coloured rooms, and eventually end up in a Sgt. Pepper's style marching band in the street outside, with all sorts of colourful characters, including large birds and crows, that link in with the animal theme on the record. The video also takes trippy detours into a sort of candy land, complete with animal masks, and the whole thing is just a bold, fun, colourful introduction to the era. She's a Handsome Woman is probably, in my opinion, the least best song on the album, and meanders pleasantly through the narrator telling someone that they clearly see through their attempts to conceal their affair. While they are fooling others, they are not fooling them. Despite its not perfect instrumentation compared to other peaks on the record, the lyrics twist wonderfully, and while initially impenetrable, are deeply rewarding once deciphered. Do You Know What I'm Seeing beautifully muses on whether the narrator's lover would stay with them through difficult times. Although for me the entire album is usually on repeat, this song especially sees heavy rotation for me on summer walks with great blue skies. That Green Gentleman, Things Have Changed, is one of my absolute favourite songs of all time, which I naively thought was about going with the ever-changing flow of life. And while indeed that is a large part of it, the song is also on a deeper level talking about all types of fluidity and how one views themselves, as the narrator discusses how they indulge in promiscuity and bed hopping to the point that they don't even quite recognise themselves anymore, but they accept themselves nevertheless. They are described as the green, greedy gentlemen, for a more wholesome type of greed, as they want to know and experience everything they can while they're alive. The music video is similarly brilliant, and focuses more on the band's development and change from their first record. The band emerges from Russian dolls before themselves becoming Russian dolls for kid versions of themselves to exit. I did mention a lot of drugs were involved in making this record, right? The highlight for me, however, has to be the band riding on penny farthing bikes, as well as boating down a river into the sunset as they laugh at their personas from the Fever era. I Have Friends in Holy Spaces was originally called Famous Friends, and is one of the 2 short tracks on the album written by Brendan. The song is a fantastic one for puddle hopping on a sunny day, and on a deeper level appears to voice some of Yuri's criticisms of strict organised religion, wanting freedom from the holy figures in his life that he can't seem to quite qualify as friends due to their adversarial relationship. Northern Downpour is primarily about touring and girlfriends and love, but lives in infamy in the Panic fandom due to one line.
I know the world's a broken bone, but melt your headaches, call it home.
This beautiful melancholy song acts as the emotional centrepiece for the album, and seemingly to a greater extent the band. Ryan wanted Brendan to pay special attention to the aforementioned lyric for whatever reason, and it seems he definitely took that on board. Spoilers, but Panic didn't stay together much longer after this record as a 4-piece, and it seems that Brendan took it particularly hard. Brendan would frequently seem to be on the verge of tears playing this song live, with new band member Dallin Weeks seemingly unable to do much to help him through it until the song was retired in 2011. As the 4th and final single off the album, the song got an accompanying music video where the band makes it their mission to spread the song's lyrics any way they can. The poetry is quite literally in the streets. While they play, people around them begin to dig up the field they're in, which is eventually revealed to be their biggest lyrical stunt yet. When the Day Met the Night is about 2 polar opposites falling in love, represented by the sun and the moon. Ross and his then girlfriend met in the summer soon after his dad passed away, and as such probably had a large influence on the song's lyrical composition. It was and remains Panic's longest song due to its wonderful orchestration that transports you to a garden tea party far away from your troubles. Pastor Cheval is narrated by a narcissistic character who believes that they have a big influence on the lives of everyone around them. The title means leg of the horse and can therefore be tied to the saying, get off your high horse. Despite its pompous nature, the song is a great time from start to finish, and one of the more traditional rock and roll tracks on the album that the band especially enjoy playing live. The Piano Knows Something I Don't Know starts off with a wonderfully wistful piano-led section where I can almost imagine days passing like a time lapse, before progressing into a more rocky tune. It's a great look inside Ryan Ross's writing process as he lets the piano lead the way and the lyrics come to him. Behind the Sea is a favourite of mine, as through its magical lyricism and calm music it allows you to forget about anything real. The song initially has a similarly nautical, but even more bizarre name in Sushi in a Tuxedo in a clown's casino. The song paints a picture of the band sailing out to sea, with their fans trying to coax them back to the shore with their silver, away from their creative aspirations. Folkin' Around is a wonderful campfire tune written once again by Yuri. It has some powerful jaunty verses, all rounded off with the returning sing-along line.
Then I'm putting out the lantern, find your own way back home.
I love the main sentiment of the song, that if I can't defeat enemies with love, then I'm just going to give up on them. There's no use wasting time on people who don't respond to love and kindness. She Had the World was originally called Snooze Me, Mrs. Britches, and is about a naive dreamer who fell for the narrator despite their disinterest. She's got her head in the clouds, and only wants to collect the narrator because she can have anyone else she wants. Ryan and John said in a track breakdown that it is also one of the ones that is closest to what Cricket and Clover sounded like, so take that for what it's worth. From a mountain in the middle of the cabins, as the backwards nature of the song title betrays, is one of the hardest to decode on the album due to the fact that they were probably off their tits writing it. The story I glean from it is one of a woman finding out her husband is a drug peddler. Even after discovering this, she still struggles to get out and let go of their relationship, repeating to herself in the chorus to try and convince herself to finally leave. Mad as Rabbits was the last song recorded for the album and the last in the track list. The song was a digital exclusive second single for the album, with a beautifully simplistic autumn-coloured music video combining footage from the behind the scenes of their album photo shoots. The song itself depicts a character that Ryan had been working on for a while, the owner of a failing calendar business. Having previously given up complete freedom of his life to support his family as a working man, and in tandem with turning to drugs to get through his monotonous life, he has become mad as rabbits. The song also ends on a different note to how it starts, calling out to everyone to reinvent love, which is most likely voicing support for various LGBT movements.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
Whether it's a simple sunny day or accepting others for who they are, this album radiates positivity and love. Needless to say, in my eyes, Panic knocked it out of the park, and while I don't think it was ever destined to be as commercially successful as their first outing, short of a spontaneous pop-punk to the 60s and 70s rock and roll revival transformation of the scene, I'm glad it won over more critics to their clear ability and has a dedicated fan following to this day. While on tour with Panic in 2008, Ryan Ross and John Walker began writing songs intended for the band's third album that was going to take the band further down their sun-soaked retro pop path. After Ryan and John showed the other members the songs they'd been working on, it became apparent that a split was occurring over the direction that the band wanted to go in. However, for a while it seemed like maybe the band could pull through, with Smith saying that the band had moved to California and was feeling inspired by surfing and beaches, and that their next record might have a Beach Boys vibe. Once again, it's clear that what could have been a potential Panic 3 would later become Ryan Ross and the Young Vanes Take a Vacation. However, communication between the band members soon began to break down for extended periods of time. Spencer and Ryan met for lunch in late June and decided they needed to take different paths going forward. John and Ryan announced their departure based on creative differences on July 6, 2009, while Spencer and Brendan stayed with Panic. Despite in interviews Ryan stating that he could see Panic carrying on for 10 years or more, I think in retrospect it's become clear that Ryan was ignoring the wants of his other band members in the hope that he could just plough ahead with what he thought was the right direction for the band. Yuri wanted the band to go for a more polished pop sound and return to some of the theatrics of their first album. In addition, with so many of the songs being Ryan's vision, he wanted to take on more primary vocal duties. Brendan noting that he had insisted on singing lead for Mad as Rabbits, which he felt guilty about being opposed to at the time. However, in retrospect, he thinks he was justified in his annoyance, as Ryan in the band had made him the lead singer unanimously. Ross made it clear that the split was very much an amicable one between the band members, but is there someone you forgot to ask? Former boss Pete Wentz clearly aligned himself with Yuri and Smith. Due to this and the fact that Brendan and Spencer kept the Panic name, the blame for the split seemed to be put on Ryan for the majority of fans. Saddled with all this hate, his next moves were intensely scrutinised by the fanbase to the point where every time he posted online or cracked a joke on Twitter, fans took it as more proof that he had lost his mind. But rather than address any of the rumours surrounding him, Ross instead threw himself headlong into his new band, initially named The Guts before the name changed to The Young Vanes. And so begins a mostly forgotten arms race between Panic and The Young Vanes to release new music and prove, even if they didn't want to, who was going to be the more successful. Panic struck out with New Perspective, released on their MySpace page in summer of 2009. The song was written just for fun by the band and ended up on the Jennifer's Body soundtrack with a promotional music video showing off the band for the first time as a duo. Around the same time, Take a Vacation's first single, Change, was uploaded to the band's MySpace page. I can't speak for which garnered more attention at the time, but if the current numbers are anything to go by, the mainstream pop appeal of New Perspective meant it blew the brilliant but humble retro single Change out of the water. Neither band was deterred, however, and they would continue powering on with writing their records. In interviews leading up to the release of their album, Ryan and Walker were the first to take shots at their former band members. Ross was mostly shocked that they had decided to keep the Panic name, while John only had mean things to say that remind me of the callousness with which the band had previously treated Brent. John stated that their decision to carry on as Panic went hand in hand with their mentality and work ethic, and that they'd rather play someone else's songs than write their own. The band had apparently suggested that Ryan make his own album, as well as working with Panic, but Ryan hadn't liked that proposal, as he felt he'd be faking it if the band wasn't playing the kind of music he was interested in. Perhaps if he'd been more diplomatic, we'd have a different Panic today. But I mean, the guys are still young. They're only in their 30s, for God's sake. Surely, Brendan, you want to make some proper weird shit again.
You later, Doctor. I mean, Look, wouldn't she make you laugh again?
My dreams of another collaboration aside, let's see if these two halves could make their albums whole. Take a Vacation was the Young Vane's only release before John Walker announced their indefinite hiatus on his Twitter page in 2010. However, if only for that brief moment in time, they managed to create something really special. Even though it didn't make a massive impact on the scene, I loved the idea that a 60s classic rock revival group with a beautiful Technicolor Wes Anderson Beach Boys aesthetic was rubbing shoulders with My Chemical Romance. But the boys went all in with the idea. The box set for Take a Vacation included a Viewmaster, a lithograph, a beach towel, a beach ball, sunglasses and a personally signed postcard. I shall find a copy of it one day. The tracklist I will be going off is the surprise January 2019 re-release that collects all the bonus covers along with the short 29-minute album into one neat package. Let's take a look. Change, as the first single off the album, is exactly what it says on the cover, a song that was spawned from the desire to go different directions that split up the original band. The song has some great Ryan Ross lyricism right out of the gate, although this time speaking more directly about an imagined character who represents the idea of the song by being one of those people that just never seems to be able to ditch bad habits. The music video has, and I'm sorry Ryan, I never learnt the breeze of 60s rock and roll bands, and at this point I'm afraid to ask, as one of its I'm sure many influences, a Beatles style edge, and is fantastic at making what is mostly a performance video a lot of fun to watch. Ryan and the rest of the group look cute with their little suits and haircuts, and I'm so upset we missed out on Panic as the Beach Boys. That would have been so damn cool. Take a Vacation is the second single off the album, and is just the perfect song to play on the beach or at the start of a holiday road trip. The whole album has the nice summery feel of Pretty Odd, while moving away from the flowery meadows to the beaches of the coastline. The second music video from the album, it is fantastic with its beautiful beach colours and 60s style video editing. It really does transport you into the little world the band created, and I frequently come back to it. Cape Town is arguably the Young Vane's most popular song, probably because it's a banger that definitely should have been a single, but also because it could allude to Ryan and John's departure from Panic, since their last show before the split was in Cape Town. However, the song also talks autobiographically about Ryan meeting a girl and telling John that he wanted to marry her then and there. However, it turned out that the girl already had a husband in jail, and luckily John stopped him from throwing his passport into the crowd so that he would have no way home. As we will see in the Vices and Virtues song The Calendar, through its lyrical parallels, it seems as if both bands refer to a night when they most likely hashed out their issues and came to an agreement as to where their futures lied. The lyric in Cape Town goes, "Woke me in the morning, asked me if I meant it, I didn't," which could imply some regret over the decision, if it is about that at all. Sung by John Walker, Maybe I Will, Maybe I Won't is another highlight of the album, with a stronger bass line and some typically incomprehensible lyrical goodness. On songs like this, the stripped back sound really proves itself, and it's nice to have rather than the band going even more orchestral than what could be found on Pretty Odd. Young Vane's Die Tonight is about being young and full of lovin', and on re-listening to the album for the first time in a while for this video, it was here that I came to the conclusion that while it doesn't quite reach the peaks of Pretty Odd, Take a Vacation definitely grows on you with repeat listens. That's not to say that the music is incredibly deep and layered thematically or musically, rather that its elegance is in its simplicity as it muses wistfully along the well-trodden path of love. Everyone But You is one of the more straightforward songs on the album, and while a bit more mournful in tone, it doesn't really stand out that much. Of course it's nice every now and then to have a song that you can comprehend on your first listen, but the lyrics on this are disappointingly simple. The Other Girl has some interesting lyricism, as it is written from the perspective of the character's conversation with the girl about her lover's affair with the other girl. However, the music itself is a bit stilted at times. Dangerous Blues is phenomenally underrated, and I think stands with some of the opening tracks as rivals to anything on Pretty Odd. The music is fantastic along with Ryan's vocals, with the whole song sinking and rising like waves which make it a joy to listen to. Defiance is the most rocky, to use a technical term, song on the album, and has a nice squealy guitar riff. The song is from Ryan's perspective, talking about moments in his life that he has acted defiantly, especially as a kid. John Walker later shared a photo in 2013 from October 2008 with the members of Panic on a bridge named Defiance, where they apparently wrote it. Light of the Truth is another more unremarkable and stilted song on the album, supposedly about how Ryan believed his then relationship was ultimately never going to end well, due to both of them having issues they struggled to overcome to be together. Heart of Mine is a lovely closer, and like Folkin' Around on Pretty Odd, is a fantastic campfire song, where everyone can sing along and stamp their feet. In a similar sentiment to Mad as Rabbits, the album closes with a message of love and togetherness, especially within the band. 5 bonus cover songs were distributed across different versions of the album on different different platforms, but collected together on the 2019 re-release. The cover of Is It True by Brenda Lee, Security by The Searchers, and Fun Love Love by Wanda Jackson are a good time, while the cover of Nothing Matters But You by the Everly Brothers is a bit strange, but has some nice vocals from Ryan Ross' future collaborator Zeeberg. The cover of When You Walk in the Room by Otis Redding, however, is fantastic, and one I come back to as often as any of the songs on the main album. Take a Vacation is by all metrics a hidden gem. It understandably didn't end up selling gangbusters, but I'm glad it exists and would love to hear some of it live someday, which might have been a possibility if the world hadn't caught fire a year ago. From September to December 2019, Ryan Ross, as part of a group called the Dead End Kids Club, played some small shows in the US, with set lists including some Young Vane songs, as well as closing with Northern Downpour on a few occasions, which took the internet rightfully by storm. However, I think most people are overlooking the bigger story, that is that in the year of our Lord 2019, on October 28th, the Dead End Kids Club performed It's Almost Halloween, and that is fantastic. While the Young Vanes were quick to put out an album due to having some music already in the backlog, the remaining members of Panic mulled over their future direction for a while before coming out with a new album in 2011. Looking back purely at the interviews and video content from this era, it is almost a certainty in my mind that Brendan especially took the band splitting the hardest of anyone in the group, and through this era's music and videos we can see almost in real time him processing moving on, before later becoming basically a solo star in his own right. Brendan seemed really quite lost without Ryan, and felt enormous pressure when taking on other band duties, especially following up Ryan's lyricism. The album's producer Rob Mathis encouraged Brendan to try and write about himself and his perspective, rather than trying to emulate what they had done before. Brendan had 30-ish minute-long demo ideas for songs, one of which would later become the Ballad of Mona Lisa, as well as an interest in revisiting the sound of their first album. However, it wasn't just going to be Fever Variety Hour. They wanted to marry the more immediate sound of Fever with some of the tenderness from Pretty Odd, saying they loved both of their albums, but wanted to bring them up to speed with where Panic was now. As previously mentioned, the band released New Perspective, which was one of the few demos they produced over the summer after the band split, along with B-sides like Oh Glory. However, the band weren't satisfied with them and started over with new material. The album was announced in December 2010 in alternative press. Brendan decided on the name Vices and Virtues after looking at the themes of the album, such as self-deprecation, pride, subversion, manipulation, but also self-expression and honesty, and coming to the conclusion that the album was a study of human behaviour. The album's artwork, on the other hand, was thought up by touring bassist, later full-time Panic member, and now member of the great duo I Don't Know How But They Found Me, Dallin Weekes, and he appears dressed in a mask behind them in the final design. Although it came out after the first single, I'm going to talk about the album's accompanying short film titled The Overture, which was accompanied by snippets of the songs from the upcoming album here, as it does act as a little statement on where the band was heading after the split. Yuri and Smith, with a score of actors ranging from identical twins to a sword swallower, are packing up to leave on a treacherous journey out of their little town. The film is quite obviously a commentary on the band's process of moving on, even down to the two ghostly figures disappearing in the opening bar scene. The band has members of their troupe they can't take with them, and others that don't want them to leave, before they finally all turn back at the final hurdle, apart from Brendan and Spencer. It's an effective introduction to the unknown musical territory that Vices seeks to explore. I think the events take place at a wake, where Brendan's ghostly vampire alter ego guides a young girl to reveal that it was Mary all along that killed him. A real Sherlock from beyond the grave. With Dallin in his dumb little hat, It's Kill Tonight was the third single off the album. In fitting with Panic tradition, the song is very spiteful about a past romance that ended bitterly, and the narrator vowing to destroy their reputation as a result. The line, "May your feet serve you well, and the rest be sent to hell," also mirrors a line from Pretty Odd, which suggests a subtle dig at his ex-bandmates for bailing on them. Despite Brendan's dashing good looks during this era, as noted in the film Love, Simon, it doesn't make the music video particularly special, as it's just a performance mixed in with some photo shoots and graveyard imagery, all in black and white. Taking a leaf out of Pretty Odd's book, Hurricane and most every other track on the album has some great orchestral instrumentation accompanying the dominant band instruments. The pace of the song is high energy, while the lyrics similarly talk about reckless and passionate romance. Memories, although pretty straightforward lyrically, tells one of the best doom love stories on the album, about a boy who gives up on his devout church life for a girl, and a girl who gives up her family for the boy. And while they tried their best to make it work, they are just destined to become memories. The narrator, presumably Brendan, acknowledges it's his memories in the chorus, which means the song could be about his potential future with his now wife Sarah, who he was seeing at the time, as other songs on the record are explicitly about her. Trade Mistakes is a real underrated gem on the album, with a nice music box sound to it, and some of the best lyrics on the album from Brendan. Ready to Go, Get Me Out of My Mind, is the second and I think strongest single off the album that that deals with taking risks and the pressure that fame brings, with the narrator deciding to take a leap of faith into it all with obvious parallels to the process of creating the album. The music video and song definitely have heavy theatre kid vibes, and while more pop-oriented, I think the song has just enough weird alternative elements such as the nice plucked strings and orchestration that it stays interesting instead of turning into pop white noise. Spencer's drums on here are also good, although a bit more subtle and restrained than perhaps on the first album to fit the cleaner album production. The music video features the band reenacting musicals such as Grease, Mary Poppins and Singing in the Rain, with some impressive choreography and acrobatics from Brendan. Always is a great Gatsby-inspired song about someone pining over someone else that doesn't appear to offer as much attention as he gives them. Yuri pushes his vocals on this album further than he ever had previously on some of the song's soaring choruses, eventually leading to the incredible pitches he can reach today. The performance here is a little more strained, with some almost voice breaks included, but it never becomes off-putting. I almost wish the song had just been Brendan and his guitar, as I think the production here is a little overdone and takes away from the picture that Brendan paints with his lyrics and vocals alone. The calendar is said to be about the departure of Ryan and John from the band, only just hidden behind the guise of a breakup song. The lyrics tell the story of a group that held their differences in for far too long, until they began to eat them away. Sarah Smiles is one of my favourite Panic songs. It blends the sounds of the first albums fantastically with different string instruments, choir backing vocals, and even a trumpet or two thrown in for an all-round great time. Brendan wrote the song in an attempt to win over his now wife Sarah, and as a result is his favourite song on the album. None other than Hayley Williams played matchmaker and introduced him to Sarah, who had previously been dating Jeremy Davis, and I didn't expect this when looking into it, but many critics praised this song as a standout on the album too, so while it may be an underplayed song, it's not underappreciated. Nearly Witches, Ever Since We Met, describes the haunting of a man by a woman he is in love with, especially by the recurring scent of her intoxicating perfume, as highlighted in the chorus and by the French children's choir in the opening. The song is a favourite among many fans, although others are not so keen due to the existence of the demo from the Cricket and Clover sessions. In light of recent allegations against Yuri, the song has been almost weaponised to show presumably how unoriginal Brendan is, and accusing Brendan of taking a song that Ryan had written about his father and making it instead about his wife. There are numerous things that are obviously wrong with this statement, such as the fact that while the lyrics of the original demo were probably predominantly Ryan's doing, the music of that era was a collaborative effort. Furthermore, the song is not necessarily about Ryan's dad, but his relationship to his family in general and how he differs from them. And finally, as far as I can tell, Brendan's version of the song is not about his wife, but a different relationship entirely, with whoever started the post possibly confusing its content with that of Sarah Smiles, or just not caring. Again, whatever you think of Brendan, I don't think it particularly helps if misinformation is spread about to try and discredit his past contributions to a band he was an integral part of, and I think as it stands, the version that appears on the album is a solid closing track. However, few if any of the tracks we got on the album hold a candle to some of the criminally discarded B-sides and demos from that era that were not included. From the creative electronic earlier demos of I Wanna Be Free and Oh Glory, to the closer to what we got on the record thrills of Turn Off the Lights and Storm Me, finally those that eclipsed the album with their effortless charm in Bittersweet and Kaleidoscope Eyes. The final album contained only 10 songs, and I wish some if not all of these could have had a space on there and replaced some of the weaker tracks like Let's Kill Tonight and Hurricane, but I'm glad we got them in some capacity at least. Some other great songs that came out during this era, where Panic seemed to be free to dip their toes into more different avenues, be they commercial or otherwise, was the strange but fun collaboration with label newcomers Fun on the song Come On, which unfortunately has only been released on YouTube. Also, for of all things the game Batman Arkham City, the group did a phenomenal little song called Mercenary, which somehow manages to work incredibly well, even with a monologue from the game's villain added into the bridge of the song. Most critics and fans at the time seemed to think it was a good revitalisation of the band and melding of its two styles, but I think not only because of the Ryan Renaissance, but also with people seeing the direction Brendan has taken with the band now, opinion on it has tempered a bit. I personally don't find it much more than an enjoyable, safe record that has some standout moments, but overall isn't in the same ballpark as the previous two. And I have to say, overall listening to these two albums, maybe it's obvious to say, but they're just two albums that feel like they were both written by half of a complete band. They needed each other to help make the magic of their first records, and it's a shame they couldn't come to an agreement where they could stay together. But it's not like the media would let Brendan and Spencer forget about it though, as every interview with them, as if mandated by God himself, required that the interviewer try and tease them for a comment on Ryan and John. Brendan always managed to steer the conversation to how their new album was born out of that process and is to step forward, but you can imagine his frustration and sadness constantly having to push out from under the other's shadow. So for him, I'm glad he made a bold effort to keep going and make something he was proud of. You may think that Panic had the most turbulent and creative time during this era, but it was just the beginning. After finishing touring for Infinity on High, Pete Wentz was eager to record the band's next album right away, but their label had different plans. They wanted them to record a cover of Beat It by Michael Jackson and shoot a high-production music video along with it. The song itself is a nice cover, with Patrick's vocals and the faster pace being what distinguishes it most from the original. The video is just kinda bizarre, as the band walk through a street littered with Michael Jackson references, and you can tell the only instruction the director gave them was to look somewhat confused by everything that was going on. The video comes crashing back to reality at the end.
Ah, it was all a dream. Was it?
Which is the third time that a music video has included Pete Wentz, or his dog, waking up from a dream. I think it's either a motif, or they just seem to be adding artificial complexity for no reason. But soon after, the band was finally able to get to work on new music. Some outlets have criticised Infinity on High for being too overindulgent, so the group purposely cut short the amount of time for recording the album, hoping it would bring them back to the days when they were a young, broke band who had to finish an album before the money ran out. In addition, Joe and Andy were included more in the writing process, as they had felt with the all-consuming influence of Pete and Patrick pairing, that they didn't know many of the songs that they played. There was also rampant speculation about what direction they would be heading, including rumours that the album would be entirely folk music or delve into rap rock. And with Panic completely switching gears, it's not difficult to see why these rumours were entertained for at least a while. But no, the album was heading instead in a more orchestral direction, and Wentz no longer wanted to write about the band's interactions with fame, instead wanting to do something more narrative focused, having the songs be stories that people would be able to engage with personally. A lot of talk during this era was directed at how best to deal with the fact that people were moving to streaming, and how singles were becoming a hotter commodity than selling an entire album. The band kind of ended up dodging answering that question by fast forwarding to after the debate had been firmly settled in streaming's favour with their next record, but for a while they were given the label the last band to sell records. They also wanted to engage people in politics, but not in the traditional punk way of calling the opposition any number of profanities, but by delving into the culture of the time, and again asking people to think and engage with the state of things. However, that's not to say they avoided backing a horse in the 2008 election. The band were firmly in the Democrat camp, supporting Barack Obama, and took part in the Rock the Vote initiative. The band had initially planned to release the album on election day, however they thought it would come off as a gimmick and didn't want to undercut the importance of the election to the country's future. Therefore, Folie A Deux's release was moved to December 2008. To celebrate Obama's inauguration, Fall Out Boy were invited to perform at the Be The Change Youth Ball in January 2009. The campaign leading up to the album's release was probably the most unique of any album put out by these bands, although it's common nowadays for fans to be given breadcrumbs through websites and social media. When a group called Citizens for Our Betterment started showing up on Pete Wentz's website and his wife Ashley Simpson was seen holding a pamphlet for the group, the fandom's ears pricked up. Further trying to engage people in politics, a video led fans to a link for No on Prop8.com, which was dedicated to defeating California's controversial Proposition 8, an initiative aimed at amending the California Constitution to keep same-sex couples from marrying. From there, the band would continue to do more publicity stunts for the campaign, mostly orchestrated by Pete Wentz and documented on his Friends or Enemies YouTube channel. Pete dropped off a dummy in the middle of the road with words spray painted on its chest. He drove around a fresh-only bakery truck with Folie A Deux on the side, giving fans shirts, donuts and instructions in character as Vlad the Baker. However, much of the momentum that was being built would be ground to a halt when for some reason another band, which had seen only minor success before, Copeland, decided it would be alright if they just created a website called Citizens4, with the word written out, not just the number, ourbetterment.com, that would spread around Fall Out Boy message boards to try and get more traffic to their website. Luckily, however, the band brought back interest with their Welcome to the New Administration mixtape, which contains famous demos such as the original Alpha Dog and a Megalomaniac clip, Lake Effect Kid, and Panic's Nearly Witches demo. This era also contains the iconic Bruno Mars' surprised to see Pete Wentz photo that Pete joked was probably the last time that he was more famous than him. The strangest relic of all from this time, however, probably has to be the Fall Out Toy Works comic, which is a series that is apparently inspired by the ideas and lyrics of Fall Out Boy. On having read it, I feel has only very tenuous limbic links, and lyrically seems to be reserved for only the issue titles such as Tiffany Blues and An Evening Out with Your Ex-Girlfriend. It didn't sell particularly well, and I found the whole thing a bit bizarre, but entertaining enough for what it was. Back to Folie A Deux, every aspect of the album's design links in with the want to engage the audience, with the song's titles on the back mirrored so the reader has to make an effort to decipher them, to the fantastically simple idea of an intentionally blank lyric book. This has led to some disagreement over lyrics, especially due to Patrick's infamously wonderful indecipherable voice. The band took away a lot of typical aspects that would allow people to make quick assumptions about the album in order to force them to listen closely to its content, and what a lot there is to listen to. The album explores decaying relationships, moral dilemmas and societal shortcomings, and paired concepts like truth and trust, arrogance and infidelity, and responsibility and commitment. Patrick also explains the album challenges the materialistic dance between any two parties obsessed with each other, whether it's teenage girls and handbag makers, politicians and lobbyists, or tabloids and stars. Juggling all these concepts meant that Folie is said to be rarely autobiographical, unlike previous albums, but it does still have a lot of Pete's voice in there, I feel. Oh, and also, just before we begin, I'd like to say that, this is in fact my favourite album of all time. So, it means a lot to me. When I was listening to it again for the millionth time for this, I found myself asking, why is this my favourite album again? Like, I looked deeper and deeper at the lyrics and the music and I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around any of it.
I don't get it. That's the point. That's the point.
I've never been a big art gallery person, but if you could just hang this album out on a wall and approach it from every angle, then you'd have something truly special. This is an album more than any other that I just want to show everyone as a true work of art that pop punk produced during this period, and I'm sure even in a few decades it will still be revealing its new hidden depths to me. So let's not wait any longer and see what we can get out of it this time through this magical head trip. Okay, so I feel a little bit less bad about not truly understanding my favourite album of all time, when just in the title of the first track, Disloyal Order of Water Buffaloes, you have a layered reference to the loyal antediluvian Order of Buffaloes, now renamed, whose motto is "No man is at all ours wise," and also Fred Flintstone's bowling team. The song talks about primarily the disloyalty of love and lovers, and how we need to boycott the concept as it keeps drawing us back in with its intoxicating influence. Fall Out Boy's As Sick As You Are falling apart to songs about hips and hearts, and wants to avoid the pain altogether. I will gush about Patrick's vocals endlessly, but can I just say thank you to whoever put the isolated vocals of all the songs on YouTube, because I could listen to Patrick sing
Painted doors in the highway, truck stop stalls, lizard scales, cool your nightlight moves all the
forever. This album is just as at home played through your headphones at deafening volume as it is in the stadium, with beautiful little vocal touches that swim in and out of each ear. But as a last note on this song, we still have a little bit of Pete Wentz' introspective lyrics and emotions poking through. He feels like an unnecessary component to something already complete, a loose bolt, as we will see when seeing how the band reacted to press and interviews after the album's release. Despite being more well adjusted than during the pressure leading up to Corktree, Pete seemed to be going through a lot, and as he writes, mentally coming apart at the seams. While a lot of the reasoning behind the songs being non-autobiographical is to explore many new avenues, it is also an expression of Pete literally pitching himself leads in other people's dreams. He can't handle his life right now, so he's exploring other people's. Some people's lives he turns his illuminating Sandman beam on first are narcissistic celebrities, himself he admits included, on I Don't Care, the album's first single, most commercially successful song, and the only cut from the record to make consistent live appearances to this day. It is by far the catchiest and most straightforward song on the album, tied perhaps with America's Sweethearts, but that just goes to show that even when it's doing something that would usually be straightforward, Foley still manages to cover itself in fantastic layers for a curious listener to peel away, with flagrant metaphors used to describe how impossible it is to ignore how brilliant the narrator is. The song is closely interlinked with its accompanying music video, which literalizes a lot of the lyrics that portray people as being two-faced by literally making everyone hidden by a mask, and exposing how fake the entire rock and roll fame machine is from within. Pete is the first to admit that the song is making fun of how the new face of rock and roll is dudes wearing eyeliner and hawking energy drinks, and that all the infighting and drama in the scene is a glorified WWE match, with someone playing the villain and someone playing the hero. She's My Winona is one of the songs that is primarily meant to be interpreted by the listener. Anyone can be your Winona, although for many people I'm sure it is Winona Ryder. The song talks about the desire for all or nothing, hell or glory, but that sometimes life has other plans that stifle those youthful ambitions or make you want to put them on hold. The song has a nice, almost irregular thumping drum beat that powers up for the chorus where the guitars really kick the song into gear. America's Sweethearts, with its catchy merry-go-round guitars and echoing drums, was chosen as the album's second single, although it did not make as much of an impact as I Don't Care that preceded it. The song comments on celebrities that get involved in attention-drawing scandals. How could they not love their sins and mistakes when it brings them so much attention? I think a fantastic thing this record does is that it explores the joy that can come with being a complete arsehole. It doesn't shy away from criticising these people, but it tries to explain why people get sucked into it, and therefore how we can try to make our way out. The video for America's Sweethearts is incredibly underrated, and is one of the best looking videos that incorporates a large amount of blue screen for the time. The video uses a mix of live action and animation to show characters being sucked into Fall Out Boy's nightmarish Hollywood fame carousel, and spat back out as self-absorbed celebrities. The Hollywood hills dripping the sickly ooze down in the backdrop is a nice touch, but for me far and away the best part is the personas the band members don. Patrick as $20 Nosebleeds Dr. Benzedrine, Wentz as Headfirst Slides Mr. Sandman, Andy as Donnie the Catcher, and Joe as the gold standard Horseshoe Crab make a wonderful cast of visual representations of the song's ideas and themes. Headfirst Slide into Cooperstown on a Bad Bet, the third exclusive online single off the album, deals with one such character, Mr. Sandman, in a haunting song that has all the emptiness of the end of The Graduate mixed with all the bravado of a marching band. The song name references baseball player Pete Rose, who was known for his headfirst slides. He was accused in a betting scandal, for which he'll most likely be kept out of the Hall of Fame, located in Cooperstown. The song deals, as the title suggests, with unwanted attention for mistakes, as Wentz as Mr. Sandman has everyone peering in to listen after his beam was leaked on the internet. The difference between the confident and funky verses and the melancholy piano chorus is a fantastic musical translation of the sentiment. On a more direct note, Patrick noted that the song is also about how lightly people can take marriage, that it acts as just another thing to have rather than a commitment, hence the emptiness the characters in the story feel during their affair. It is also forever locked in a three-way battle with Welcome to the Black Parade and the carpal Tunnel of Love are the title of my favourite song. The song has a music video of sorts, guest starring Brendan Urie and Spencer Smith, titled A Weekend at Pete Rose's. The reason many may not have seen it is that for some reason it was released on goddamn Vimeo, and a now seemingly defunct YouTube channel. The video shows the young Panic members finding Pete's washed up corpse on the beach and taking him for a day trip before finally dropping him off outside a theme park after taking him on all the rides. The Shipped gold standard is the musical equivalent of throwing in the towel on the whole Fame affair. The song title finds them disillusioned with the industry, saying that their worth is intrinsically linked and based on the amount of records they can ship. The song has a deep longing to return home and live a normal life, but the difficulty of actually disappearing from the public eye and Fame's tempting pull seems to stop the narrator every time. Although Truman plays the character of Horseshoe Crab, the luckiest man, in the America's Sweetheart video, the memory described in the song about misinterpreting their good fortune is actually Pete's. I think even though that aspect is autobiographical, the fact that Pete describes a time when he misinterpreted something and the subjectivity of his viewpoint as a child really makes for a mature way of looking at the world and all the different perspectives in it. Although apparently originally titled Never Believe, the final name for Coffees for Closers comes from the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, where coffee is a reward reserved only for real estate salesmen who close their sales. Similar to She's My Winona, it has an all or nothing attitude about it, with the narrator preaching that only the successful get what they want. The chorus with the violins and the wonderful lyric, absolutely gives me chills every time and links really closely with the politics of the album. In an interview, Patrick describes people's disillusionment with politics and the inherent goodness of humanity and their ability to change, especially after going from the promise of the 90s to George Bush, which the band are very outspoken and critical about. What a Catch, Donny is, to me, a truly beautiful song and the perfect culmination and loving send-off to the pre-hiatus era. It is also a brilliant representation of what was at the core of the magic of the first era, which was Patrick and Pete's brilliant ability to collaborate, and while Pete has managed to pitch himself as other strangers over the course of the album so far, here he takes on Patrick's perspective. It is one of Fall Out Boy's only ballads to this day, and possibly as a result of its uniqueness was, and may still be, Patrick's favourite FOB song. Or it might have something to do with the fact that they had got one of his favourite musicians, Elvis Costello, to record guest vocals for the bridge despite him battling bronchitis at the time. The song suggests that Pete realises that sometimes Patrick didn't think too much of himself, but in a way that many people don't recognise their talents as being worthwhile. It's tinged with some humour, however, as the title itself plays a pivotal role, saying who would ever want to be with someone like me. The answer, of course, is Pete would like to. And throughout the song and in the bridge, where it shifts back to Pete's perspective, we learn how important Patrick has been. The Donny and Flack referred to in the song are Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack, who were both solo artists but found greater success when they teamed up together on a duet album. Unfortunately, Donny committed suicide before the second album could be completed, but in the bridge, Pete assures Patrick that despite what they've been through, Pete will never end up like him, trying to finally put his worries in the past. The song was the fourth promotional single for the album, and the final music video released through the major channels. It was seen as a definitive final statement from the band, not least because of the finality of the song's ending, with the band employing cameos from all their friends to reprise their earlier hits. The song's music video has Patrick as a captain of a tiny vessel out in the ocean, where he comes across the wreckage of the good ship Fall Out Boy and manages to rescue some survivors drifting on a lifeboat who happen to be all the band's friends and collaborators. The ship sinks down into the ocean, but someone is missing. It is implied in the final version and explicitly shown in a leaked, unreleased version of the video that Pete goes down with the ship, which demonstrates where the band was at the time in relation to their future together. 27 is perhaps one of the most underrated songs in Fall Out Boy history. The title is a reference to the 27 Club, the name given to the unusually long list of musicians who have died at age 27, including Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain, often from drug overdoses. Wentz thought he might end up going the same way, was ecstatic that he and the rest of the band made it past the milestone. The song, however, has a bit of a cynical and sarcastic twist on the whole situation, especially in respect to Pete's mental health and the potential profitability of his mistakes and struggles as song lyrics. The more traditional song structure means that little touches like the way Patrick says, "Chasing the direction, chasing the," dances around your head, and the X-Files style space noises don't get lost in the mix. The song also has a great guitar solo from Joe, which is disappointingly rare across all of Fall Out Boy history. Tiffany Blues is where the true experimentation begins. The song has Pete's bass as its most prominent since Dance Dance in the intro, and Patrick's little soulful vocal touches are wonderful. The song is the first Fall Out Boy song to prominently feature a guest artist from the rap scene, and then they only got Lil Wayne to up and sing. The band would go on to have more traditional rap features from artists like Big Sean and Burna Boy on later albums to mixed success. It was joked in the fandom that Wham stood for Whence Ate My Sideburns, however it was confirmed later by Andy Hurley to stand for waitress, actress, model, singer. The song is a reference to the kind of people who usually end up taking jobs like waitressing to make ends meet, while they try to make it in the big leagues of entertainment. The song refers to such people as freckles, part of a huge cluster of similar dots, and asks them what they think makes them so special, both sincerely and sarcastically. The song makes makes out that everyone is essentially alone in the fame business, but also dips its toe into some self-aggrandizing talk, as the narrator talks about how when others were just getting started, they were already miles ahead. However, the song breaks down in the end to reveal a little acoustic outro sung soulfully by Patrick, as he reveals some more of the seedy aspects of constantly being forced to perform and create. $20 Nosebleed was described by Pete in the lead up to the record as the haziest song on the album, and was said to be about futuristic desert combat. The song focuses on the drug benzodrine and the narrator's dependence on it. The side effects and risks associated with benzodrine are numerous, one of which being a nosebleed, and the drug was sold for around $20 at the time. The song once again talks about the idea of dropping everything and disappearing due to the constant pressures of life and the seeming madness of the world around them at the time. However, once again the narrator can't resist the pull of the limelight, coming back like a stray dog every time. Parallel to this runs the idea of another trip that a lot of people didn't come back from, and a massive political issue. The song criticises George Bush going to war in the Middle East and sending American soldiers to die in Iraq and Afghanistan, a conflict that went on for the better part of 20 years. The futuristic desert combat he was referring to turned out to be more modern warfare than Star Wars. The song ended up a fan favourite for many off the album due to it prominently guest featuring Brendan Urie on the chorus. Patrick and Brendan went toe to toe in the studio, singing into either side of the same microphone. Patrick had to be stood on a box in order to be the same height as Urie, which is adorable. The song concludes once again with an extended outro, this time another spoken word section by Pete Wentz, similar to that of Get Busy Living or Get Busy Dying. It lays out the narrator's emotions plain and simple, talking about how his relationships can feel like a taxidermy, being stuffed so that they're suitable for display to the public, but he also states that if he had enough miles on his card, he'd fly all the soldiers over in the conflicts in the Middle East back home. West Coast Smoker is another song that frequently makes it onto lists of underrated FOB songs, and for good reason. It's aggressive, abrasive, and like the monologue before it, straightforward as the narrator admits to their own insanity. Debbie Harry of Blondie provides the vocals of the first half of the chorus, another brilliant small addition from the star-studded cameo cast, and she compliments Patrick fantastically. The song as a whole encapsulates the push and pull madness of the album, with the narrator choosing to fall from grace dramatically rather than step off the fame train on purpose. The narrator is a nervous wreck with a debilitating drug habit and somehow has captured people's interests, with the song at some points being critical of fan bases who loyally follow the disorganized religions of famous people's minds. However, it also praises them, saying that they're all in the madness together, as they'll never get through customs and be accepted into reasonable society, and I think that just about sums it up perfectly. Pavlov, a wonderfully dark song about a character's unhealthy addiction to loneliness that they ironically want to share with the world, was the only B-side added to the Lux edition of the album and would have fit perfectly on it, although some other songs that could have been in development for the album at some point were included on the mixtape we discussed earlier. However, there is also the hidden track called Lullaby that could only be found by rewinding the CD. The sweet little song was written by Wentz to his son Bronx Mowgli Wentz, and a bit like Blood off the Black Parade takes a completely different approach to the album tonally, but still effectively summarises its themes and ideas as a little prelude or hidden epilogue. So, what did I think of my favourite album of all time? I can safely say that I think it's pretty good. It seems almost prophetic now, but Stump said in an interview before it was released that while he loved the record, he wasn't sure if people would like it and if it would become popular.
And you know what? It never did.
It has since got more recognition, and most fans either appreciate the album or, like myself, see it as their magnum opus. However, this was certainly not the case at the time. While critics were generally receptive to it, fans were split. The fans that didn't like it were very vocal, even going so far as to boo at shows when they performed songs from it. During this era, the band did seem to be running on empty during promotional appearances and interviews, especially Pete. He took a back seat to Patrick, who did most of the talking in interviews, and didn't have much time for putting on a happy face and doing the whole promotion dance. Possibly burnt out by the negative reception to the album by some corners, his mental health and problems in his life at the time. The inner turmoil in the band was probably not helping either, with the recording process for Folie being described by Patrick as painful, noting that despite thinking his lyrical content on the album was his best work yet, that he and Wentz quarrelled over many issues, revealing he threw something across the room over a major to minor progression. By 2010, the band were fending off questions about whether they would be breaking up, with Pete saying they'd stop doing the band when it stopped being fun. It seemed like it hadn't been fun for the members for a while, and at the end of their tour with Blink-182, they played their last show. If the group was going to go, they were going to go with a bang, as they pulled out all the stops to put on an excellent show, with a sick-ass drum kit suspension rig for Andy to play at a 45-degree angle for some reason, and guests like Brendan Urie showing up at different dates. On the last date of their tour, while the band closed out their set with their usual performance of Saturday, Mark Hoppus symbolically shaved off Pete's hair as he announced that a new dark chapter was beginning. However, before all that, we got Fall Out Boy's first greatest hits album, Believers Never Die, adorned with a beautiful version of The Lovers of Valdero. The album contains a couple of fantastic bonus tracks. Alpha Dog is finally fully realised and has some fantastic lines like which leans into the disappearing act theme of their hiatus. From Now On We're Enemies is an absolutely underrated song that has some great vocal moments in the chorus from Stump, brilliantly self-descriptive lyrics from Wentz, and just a banger of a tune from Troman and Hurley. Their strange little obligatory Christmas song, You'll Shoot Your Eye Out, is also included, and honestly of all the less than stellar Christmas songs these bands have done, this one may well be the best, but that's not saying much. The band did always specify a hiatus, however that didn't stop them sinking into sadness and depression, with Andy and the rest having to adjust to their now clear schedules, and Wentz still dealing with the dangerous use of Xanax, as well as his divorce with wife Ashley Simpson. Luckily, his newfound approach to life meant that he went to therapy and tried his best to grow up and mature, sharing custody of his son and embracing the older age he never thought he would reach. He went on to form the electronic duo Black Cards and wrote a book, while Hurley drummed with multiple bands and continued to manage his label. He also teamed up with Troman and others in a heavy metal band called The Damn Things. Stump had grown to despise the band's emo image and was angered by the fact that it would continue to follow him around forever. We'll get into his solo effort momentarily, but his gripes were well founded as its initial reception and his treatment by the industry was greatly impacted by his image. Eventually he sat down and wrote a public letter called We Liked You Better Fat, Confessions of a Pariah, which talked openly about the struggles he faced from fans who had taken to insulting him, sent threatening letters to his home, and brought tickets to his solo tour dates just to tell him how much he sucked without Fall Out Boy. Despite all this, Stump still got on well with the rest of the band members, even having Wentz as his best man at his wedding, and the band agreed that the hiatus helped them figure out themselves after spending so long focused on the band. But it was that little record that Patrick put out for me that was a little flicker of shining light in this dark period for the band, because if Folie A Deux was the Communist Manifesto, Soul Punk is Das Kapital, motherfucker. Over the course of the hiatus, Patrick Stump was determined not only to put his emo image behind him, but to prove to others and himself his musical ability. The commercial failure of Folie at the time had in a way motivated him to do just whatever he wanted to do. Joking in an interview, what is the worst that could happen? I don't sell records. I'm already not selling records. Despite in the public eye seeming to work exclusively on Fall Out Boy, a whole musical evolution was happening from the bass of his bedroom across his whole career, which led him to the sound we got on the album, and his skills for more instruments than I've had school dinners. He also wanted to make himself healthier physically and mentally. He managed to lose a lot of weight, which he was incredibly happy about achieving, and had made good progress with the album, documenting a lot of the process and posting other supplementary material such as mashups and covers on a YouTube channel and his website. On November 29th, 2009, Patrick released 2 versions of his song Spotlight, subtitled New Regrets and Oh Nostalgia, respectively, on his website so that fans could vote to decide which should appear on the album. However, although Oh Nostalgia won out, when the album was pushed back from February 2011 to October later that year, it was put on Truant Wave as Patrick felt that it needed its own record, building Truant Wave around it. The album was delayed at the 11th hour as Patrick wrote what would become the lead single for the album, This City, and decided that he wanted some more time to bring the rest of the album in line around its sound. I'd be really interested to hear the original version of the album before Patrick tinkered with it, and any other demos from early in the album's life, as he didn't have a concrete direction for the project from the outset, noting that it could have gone in a rockier direction or been a jazz or blues record. The Truant Wave EP is populated with more electronic-based songs, whereas Soul Punk is focused almost entirely on live instrumentation. Stump stated that the EP was almost like a mini concept record, as the narrator starts off with his best intentions, becomes a massive fame-drunk dickhead, then by the end he's down and out in Hollywood, drunk and telling someone, look kid, don't make the same mistakes I did. The EP had songs that didn't fit on Soul Punk for one reason or another, but still resonated with Patrick. The first song is Porcelain, and honestly it is just as good as anything on Soul Punk, with a blistering pace, a great feature, and the fantastic line,
Have you ever met somebody who was perfect till you met
Spotlight on Nostalgia got a limited 500 pressing release on vinyl, as well as a music video which was Patrick's first, featuring a wholesome looking Stump engaging with people's cool talents. It's completely different to anything Fall Out Boy ever did or has done, and while to my cynical ass is a little tonally too close to summer resort adverts, putting that aside, it is really sweet. Cute Girls, while making an interesting point about misogyny and objectification of young women, doesn't quite work for me, and the electronic instrumentation leaves a bit to be desired. Love, Selfish Love, and As Long As I Know I'm Getting Paid are both absolute bangers about selfishness and success that would fit in well with the more satirical songs on Soul Punk but bolster Truant Wave nicely. Unfortunately, I think Big Hype is another dud for me, but the experimentation on it is admirable and the lyrics are interesting enough. Moving forward to the album, the lyrical themes go heavier into dealing with corporate greed as well as self-belief as shown on Spotlight and innocence and idealistic relationships on Porcelain. In these ways, Truant Wave was a great primer for this new era of Stump. I wasn't kidding when I said this was a very based album earlier either. Comrade Stump has hidden messages in the lyric book of the album itself itself, with one being Reaganomics failed, and another being a poetic call for people to rebuild trust in one another and remember that happiness is still free. Explode opens the album in a massive way, inviting you to a party at the end of the world, much like how Panic preempted negative critical reception and other preconceived expectations. While the literal story is of Tony, whoever he may be, disarming a bomb, the lyrics metaphorically reference Patrick's anxiety about forging a path of his own. The bomb is his excitement and anticipation as much as it is a critical or commercial bomb, and it's whether he can ride the wave of the former or successfully disarm the latter. Probably the song that is closest to what he did before with Fall Out Boy on the album. It eases listeners in with the familiar to open them up to the places the album will take them. When talking about this city, I'll also cover the remix here despite them appearing separately on the album. The remix was the only single off the album and peaked just outside the Hot 100. As previously mentioned, the song was thought up at the 11th hour, and after his management responded positively to it, Patrick went back to the drawing board, taking This City, Ali, Dance Miserable and Everybody Wants Somebody, and rebuilding the album around them for a few months. Patrick wanted to experiment with some more straightforward lyrics than the typically wordy and verbose lyrics that usually populated other Fall Out Boy records. This, along with a cleaner sound, makes it the most straightforward pop song on the record, but dig a little deeper, and it's just as insightful as any of the more complex songs on the album. It seems like Patrick is trying to put his album in a nice pop Trojan horse to get it through the city gates, so people will give his weird project a chance. I think without it wouldn't have seen the limited success it did in the mainstream. The music video, in contrast to what Patrick described as the more goofy Fall Out Boy videos, was much more modern and stripped down, with cool, trippy, colourful visuals, along with black and white footage of Patrick in Chicago. I don't usually listen to the Lupe Fiasco version, but the feature and verse works well and ties it together as a radio single. Dance Miserable is a favourite of mine off the record, and I mean, the whole album is underrated, but this one is underrated even amongst its small listener base. Through fantastic lyricism that holds a candle to anything Wentz has written for Fall Out Boy, Patrick rips into the Republican Party and expresses his dislike for right-wing politics. Patrick feels isolated in the predominantly right-wing circles he found himself in the music industry, and on tour in America during the Bush presidency. Whether it's the impact of the financial crisis or anything else that happened during this era, there was much to be concerned about politically, which unfortunately but brilliantly makes the album just as relevant now as it was at the time. Spotlight New Regrets is a funkier version compared to its other counterpart, and has more focused vocals, which I think makes it a better version. Just a sweet little song about being confident in yourself, no matter what people say. Much like Explode, The Iron Line has literal events that have metaphorical relevance. One of the slower songs on the record, but never boring, it tells the story of a married man having an affair, and how he and the other woman got to this stage in their life. The song, however, is a metaphor for selling yourself out, exchanging what you believe for money. The opinion that Fall Out Boy or Patrick at any point has gone mainstream and sold out has followed them around for almost their entire career, and this is a fantastic statement from Stump saying how much the idea of it is morally repugnant to him. Run Dry, cross hearts, cross fingers, is impressive enough on its own, but when paired with Cryptozoology, becomes an 8-minute masterpiece of danceable funky goodness. Run Dry is following the trend of Dance Miserable and Explode, literally about struggles with alcoholism, but stands more generally for the inability to recognise and overcome one's vices. I wish this one had been a single if they had embraced the more danceable aspects of the album and its promotion, as it is just impossible to resist clapping along to. The song transfers smoothly into the phenomenally titled Cryptozoology, which may be my favourite word of all time. What's cooler than the study of things not proven to exist? The song is literally about a teasing back and forth between two strangers, but like Explode, tackles snobbish critics' perceptions of him. I also love the lyric. As it links with the title in that people are expecting Patrick to be what he has been since he was 17, a punk rock star, but he grew up and this is something new. Greed is probably the greatest lyrical achievement on the album. We dash between clever jabs and references at breakneck pace in the first verse, touching on the failure of laissez-faire policies, critiquing the callous disregard of previous dumpster fire, current spinning corpse, Ayn Rand, all the way to the fable of the freeloading grasshopper and the hard-working ants that would go on to inspire the revolutionary political masterpiece A Bug's Life. The chorus is one of the wordiest Patrick has done since Sugar We're Going Down, but remains just as catchy. The bridge is similarly fantastic, calling for Gordon, Greed is Good Gecko, Bernie, Ponzi Scheme Madoff, and movie stars to pop their white collars up. The song powers through so much in 3 minutes that it's understandable it needs a little instrumental outro to let the audience breathe afterwards. Everybody Wants Somebody Else talks about love and relationships in a way that is really insightful, and what I find uniquely brilliant, brutally honest, to the point where it touches on some elements that people aren't usually quite open to admit to. Everybody is the danciest of all the ones mentioned, and I think would also have made a good single. Ali is my favourite song on the album, and with raw, vulnerable and surprising honesty, sees Patrick talk about his regrets over botching his first potential potential sexual encounter. There's an acoustic performance of the song which is probably playing on screen right now, where he almost breaks down while performing it, and it was that performance that really just made me feel the frustration and love and vulnerability with all my heart. Coast, It's Gonna Get Better, in the same vein as Spotlight, is a hopeful, confident track about looking to the future and feeling hopeful. It closes the original track list of the album with a positive note, after the exploration into the seedy underbelly of society and deep emotions the album has taken us on, even though we were dancing all the way. Bad Side of 25, the first bonus track, grew on me so much over time. The song tackles the idea that it's all downhill after turning 25. The lyrics are incredibly good at painting a picture in your mind of how the tedium of daily life can be a struggle, but it is also beautiful in an everyday way. The bridge once again is fantastic, following the pattern of the I and Lie and Greed and calling out to an imagined audience, asking them to remember a bunch of things they'd only get if they were over 25, before Patrick humorously asks them not to sing the Chicago Bears Super Bowl Shuffle, as some things are definitely best left in the past. People Never Done a Good Thing is a more general critique of how society has become very dependent on convenience and lacks the ability to think individually and is prone to mob mentality. It is one of the funkiest songs on the record and incredibly danceable with a brilliant little guitar solo. When I Made You Cry and Mad at Nothing are the final two bonus tracks on most editions, and again both resonate with me in the way they talk about relationships and miscommunication of wants and desires. When I Made You Cry has incredibly complex lyrics, needing a level of deciphering that would make Pretty Odd songs jealous, while Mad at Nothing focuses on a very specific viewpoint and does it incredible justice. Saturday Night Again was the B-side to This City and is included in some versions of the album as a bonus track. It's similar to Run Dry, but focuses instead on the monotony of making the same mistakes in love every Saturday night when out on the town. I think it would also fit nicely along with As Long As I'm Getting Paid and Love Selfish Love on Truant Wave with little adjustment. Soul Punk is a phenomenal achievement from the literal one-man band that is Patrick Stump. It's intelligently written and performed, and I'm gutted that as of yet we haven't had a follow-up nor a return of Devil Stump, because it seems like only the beginning of what he's capable of doing with solo album projects. The album was released to generally positive critical reviews and made it to number 47 on the Billboard charts, but dropped off after only 1 week. The most egregious response, however, was Kerrangs, who just completely shit the bed and gave it a measly 2 stars. You gave Mania 4 stars, and all you could manage to dribble out was 2 goddamn stars. Kerrang! God, I hate the UK. Society has moved past the need for the United Kingdom. Patrick kept the momentum of his album going with extensive radio tours and multiple interviews, and 2 US tours, opening slots for Bruno Mars and Janelle Monáe, and some dates in Europe. Although the first tour had a mixed reception due to many attendees being people who thought he'd played Fall Out Boy songs, the second tour was apparently a much bigger success as he'd managed to find an audience of his own. He went all out on the small production budget, dressing as the ever-popular Devil Patrick with light-up horns and heavy eyeliner, which looks fantastic. Patrick admitted to blowing his nest egg on the record and touring to support it, and by the end of the whole process was, at least by celebrity standards, flat broke. His one hope out of all of this was that he'd be able to keep making enough money to make records forever. Again, because life is cruel, Patrick debated releasing the unfinished follow-up to Soul Punk, and for God's sake, now I know it exists, I want to hear it more than anything. We will get into some more of his solo projects later, but for now in regards to Soul Punk, I can only hope that one day he releases some of the extra bonus material, and I'll keep the album on repeat until then. This experimental period had already claimed 2 bands, and now it was time for Paramore to go through the ringer. Especially in comparison to the other bands on here that can be very secretive and elusive on the subject of internal struggles. Perhaps it's Paramore's Christian Honesty, but they straight up explain in great detail the struggles they've gone through with each other in interviews during the end of the Riot era and the beginning of Brand New Eyes. The band had to abruptly cancel a European tour in 2008, citing a lot of internal issues. It was later revealed that Hayley and Josh had been dating from 2005 to 2007, and their recent split had inevitably affected the band. However, Hayley also felt alienated by the rest of the group, while the Farrow brothers especially still had hang-ups about Hayley being the only one signed and seemingly the band's star attraction. The band was also struggling with press, still trying to wrap their heads around a band that was so young, so Christian, did not do drugs, and had a girl in it that was so popular. The album therefore is of course about growing up and looking at things with brand new eyes, with the band represented on the cover as the image of a taxidermy butterfly divided into pieces, which must be united to function. Being the primary lyricist, it is Hayley's perspective we get to hear most prominently, and in the greatest emotional depth over the course of the album. The depth of the lyricism, the brilliant riffs, and the ever-prominent drums are all brought together as always by Hayley's voice, here taken to place it has never been before, making it a phenomenal achieved emotional photo shoots to fill the gap between bigger budget videos for other singles. Ignorance was the first single off the album, and is like if Misery Business backfired and caught all the band members in its blowback. Hayley was incredibly nervous about confronting her fellow band members and vented that frustration into the song. However, she then realised she had to sing it. She tried to mumble the words at practice, but Taylor York confronted her afterwards and asked what the lyrics were about. However, it seems like overall the song managed to break through an invisible barrier in the band and make them able to talk to each other about it. So in the end it managed to bring them together for at least a little while. Josh was also feeling insecure about the fact he may never write a song as good as Misery Business, but this song put him back on track and gave him new energy to continue writing for the new record. The music video has a great little claustrophobic performance in a large closet revolving around a single light bulb shining accusingly on the band. Playing God is one of my favourite songs on the record, and in contrast to the other explosive and fast-paced songs, is more methodical and haunting with its piano elements, especially on the fantastic call and response bridge between Hayley and Josh. Similar to Ignorance, the song talks about certain accusatory people that should get down from their high horse, or Hayley's going to knock them off it. Although it is very much on the offensive, the idea that whoever is without sin should cast the first stone is a very Christian sentiment, and it feels like whoever is putting her down should dwell on it for a while. The song's music video is considered a spiritual sequel to Ignorance. Once again in the video the band is trapped in a small dark space, however this time it is due to the evil machinations of Hayley herself, who is trying to act as if everything is normal and hosting a tea party upstairs. In Brick by Boring Brick, Hayley talks to a young girl and warns her about the dangers of trying to run from reality and tells them to get rid of their unrealistic goals. However, the song is not so cynical as to just be a miserable never try never fail sentiment, instead just trying to stop people from building up defensive walls to distract them from dealing with their problems. The imagery of bricks was chosen because they are solid and real, and also very boring, but can be made into something strong. The music video for the song was filmed on set surrounded by blue screen, and unfortunately, unlike America's Sweetheart, suffers dramatically as a result. Some of it can definitely be put down to the fact that the YouTube version of this video is in 480p, but even though the dramatic swinging Hayley looks great, the rest of the video bites off far more than it can chew, with the poor little child actor having to imagine and react to any number of things they can't see. The camera work is on occasion very jarring, and a lot of it just looks a bit silly, apart from the ending, which is pretty good, because it's always entertaining to see Hayley yeet a child into an open grave. In the behind the scenes, the setup for the shots looks alright, but what really hampers the video is that everything is covered in a piss autumn colour filter. Turn It Off deals with some problems Hayley has with the mainstream religion, and her difficulty to stay on track with their ideals in her personal relationship with God. She admits that at times her faith was tested, and it seems like she was better off alone, while also, like previous songs, criticising people that see themselves as perfect for being too prideful. The song is hopeful, however, with her explaining that once you reach the bottom, the only way you have to look is up. The only exception was the first time in Paramore Hayley had been very open about her parents' divorce, which had affected her a lot, especially as it happened when she was young, and it wasn't pretty, recalling times when she had been standing in between them screaming "shut up" to try and stop them fighting. Due to this, Hayley had been very much put off the idea of long-term love. However, this song talks about her finding someone she believes in she can see a future with. The song therefore is very personal for good and ill. Hayley claimed it was the first love song she ever wrote for Paramore. Again, reflecting the openness of the band, the music video is very literal, having Hayley waking up after a night with some bloke and leaving a note in her absence. She then moves through rooms quite stylishly like a Wes Anderson film, apathetically drifting through speed dating and wedding services until she sees someone that makes her realise she should have stayed all along, and goes back to rip up the note and return to the guy's side. In retrospect, the song is now one of Hayley's least favourite due to it explicitly being about her now ex-husband, Chad Gilbert. I think it's a bit too sappy for my taste anyway, so I don't mind it not getting pedalled out for shows anymore. But still it shows that Paramore can do more than just pump out pop-punk bangers. Speaking of which, Feeling Sorry, Looking Up and Where the Lines Overlap are three great pop-punk bangers. Feeling Sorry is about people who want good things to happen to them while they don't work to get it. Looking Up is a rare and much needed moment of positivity on the album, and one Hayley has cited as her favourite as it was honest about how proud she is of Paramore. Finally, Where the Lines Overlap is an especially underrated gem that addresses the interpersonal problems that the band members were having at the time, but with a more positive outlook of overcoming the issues in the near future. Some have also suggested that the song is about Hayley's long-term relationship with Chad Gilbert at the time, as they were both touring musicians whose paths only occasionally crossed. But in a nice sentiment, Hayley says that maybe if she sang the song loud enough, he could hear it wherever he was. Misguided Ghost pulls together all the drifting and conflicting emotions that populate the album into a haunting track, again one more stripped back with an acoustic guitar in Hayley's performance. All I Wanted breaks free after Misguided Ghost like a phoenix from the ashes and is absolutely bloody brilliant. The song is a jaw-dropping showcase of Hayley's vocal talents that has been rarely but spectacularly demonstrated live on a few occasions. The song is powerful and heart-wrenching, and if you don't have any vocal range among different shades of gravel like me, you will strain like hell to sing along to it, but it's phenomenally good, and the epic instrumentation stays subtle in the verses before crashing in as it should during the chorus. And after all that, it's Twilight Time Baby, with Decode being included as a bonus track on some versions of the album. The song is actually at least somewhat engagingly written in that it is about the tension tension, awkwardness, anger and confusion between Bella and Edward in the story. The music video similarly is quite iconic within the fandom. The band filmed in dense wood with scenes from the film interspersed. While they didn't go the MCR way of denying themselves that vampire money, it was obvious that to the band it was more than a cash grab and they made an effort with it. Although singles off Riot have been a big hit in pop-punk circles, Decode brought them more mainstream recognition and success, piggybacking off Twilight's popularity. Brand New Eyes is a fantastically open and mature record that really musically and lyrically demonstrates the changes the band was going through at the time and their growth as people and artists. Unfortunately, however, all the being open the world couldn't solve the band's problems, and Zach and Josh Farro decided to leave the band soon after touring for the album. Along with the usual misleading articles published about the band, it was what was said by Josh Farro in particular about Hayley and the band after his departure that created a lot of the mythos around Hayley being a diva and controlling in the band, lauded by those who disliked the band for one reason or another as the reason to dismiss them entirely. A lot of Josh's hang-ups seem to lie with Hayley being the only one signed, and therefore how the rules for her were different than the rest of the band. It's generally agreed upon by the band members who remained and left that Hayley was frequently late to practice and band meetups, possibly because she was meeting with record label executives and doing other tasks without them, mostly overseen by her seemingly tight-fisted management. Hayley was apparently a pawn of her management in the early days of the band especially, and they had forced her to attempt a solo career before returning to the band, and therefore it was felt by some she could take or leave them when she saw fit, which did much to undermine the camaraderie of the group. While I think a lot of the events in these statements are true, I think the interpretations are uncharitable if understandable. Josh obviously cared a lot about music and being seen as a legitimate part of the band, but from what I can see, didn't really properly understand the effect the pressures of being the only girl in a male-dominated world had on Hayley. And that's not an exaggeration. She was for the longest time the only girl on the tour bus with up to 10 or more other guys at once for extended periods of time while she was still a young teenager. Furthermore, again being so young, it is a miracle she managed to stand up to her overbearing management and label to stay with this band she cared about, even if she was rightly tempted to go on her own as they wanted her to do. All over Brand New Eyes and interview statements, she is clawing and fighting to keep the band together, perhaps thinking that if she says the band has fixed their issues enough, they actually will. The rest of the band had wanted a bit more time to respond, but they soon found out the hard way how quickly false information could spread on the internet.
You really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies?
A fake blog post was created, and so the band had to rush to make a real statement to assure everyone the band would carry on and respond to Josh's accusations. A more coherent answer was later given in an extended interview called The Last Word. Also, can I just say that Hayley handles invasive questions like a pro? Whoever was orchestrating that interview can fuck right off. Probing Hayley on her thoughts about Josh getting married, as well as asking, what would Jesus say about Paramore? Bloody journalists, man. After the brothers left, the band, now consisting only of Hayley Williams, Taylor York and Jeremy Davis, wanted to prove that they were dedicated to continuing the band. They would eventually release their next album 4 years later, but in that time they released some music to let people know they were still working on it and developing their sound into something more pop-oriented. First came the song Monster, which I hadn't really given any time to before researching this video, and while it is pretty straightforward and kind of radio safe, it is very catchy. The music video boldly states that the band is still here and soggier than ever in a weird black pool, and the band also do some dramatic running down hallways just cuz. The Singles Club EP was released soon after with some more catchy and fun but simple songs in the form of Renegade and Hello Cold World. In the Morning, however, is a nice little melancholic tune and demonstrated that the band were going to be able to continue to effectively expand their musical horizons. So yet another one of our 4 bands had sold a bit of their soul to the music gods to produce their best music yet and given away their solidarity as an exchange. The process would be repeated one more time, but this time would wipe the band off the face of the earth for 7 long years. After having made 3 concept albums in a row and 2 years of touring Black Parade, My Chemical Romance were looking to change it up. Gerard stated in an interview that he wanted to move away from a definite story and take a more raw, aggressive and, well, punk approach to whatever they were going to create next. In 2009, the band travelled to Los Angeles to begin production for what would ultimately be known as Conventional Weapons, a collection of songs that they were initially unsatisfied with and scrapped, but would later be released as 5 singles, collected into one 10-song box set, which most fans, myself included, consider an unofficial album from the band. And while they were not necessarily what the band was looking for at the time, I'm not joking when I say this little project contains some of my favourite songs the band has ever produced. The album's sound is for me the perfect version of the raw punk energy that was most present on 3 Cheers, but with even stronger guitars and clearer vocals that one might think would make the album less impactful, but that couldn't be further from the truth. And if that point needed to be proved, it's hammered into your brain at 100 miles per hour with the brilliant opener Boy Division, originally named Tokyo Death Squad. The song has an absolutely blistering pace, relentless drums and an absolutely insane breakdown in the bridge where Gerard wails Honestly, to talk about this song anymore would be a disservice to its immediacy, so I won't. Tomorrow's Money is another lightning-paced track with some fantastic lyrics about their refusal to sell out that would come back on Vampire Money. Although the album doesn't quite have the grandiose themes of their previous records, I think it captures for me what can only be described as like the feeling of comic books and Wolverine and Deadpool's regenerative factor. Just this feeling of speed and adrenaline and being bulletproof, and like no matter how much you pepper the guys with bullet holes, they're going to keep coming for you. Probably makes no sense, but it's fucking awesome. Ambulance portrays MCR as the vehicle to save the band and the fans, so let's all get in together and fuck shit up. There's a more ethereal and nostalgic sounding chorus, which is a nice bit of variety after the non-stop of the first two songs. Gun is and has been topical for coming up to 20 years now, as the band wrote it about the people they had met who had been wounded in Afghanistan. While the main message is pretty clear, its choice of perspective is interesting and unique, switching from a new naive recruit to the army to that of a recruitment officer. It's nice to have some more political statements from the band that are direct on an issue. The World is Ugly states that even if the amount of shitty people in the world may outnumber you, you'll never fight alone. Someone always has got your back. Gerard's vocals here are fantastic, and it ends with a nice little callback to early sunsets over Monroeville, with the final electronic bleat of Like Ghosts in the Snow. The Light Behind Your Eyes is one of the most phenomenal, slower and heartfelt songs that Mycam have ever created. The general consensus seems to be that Gerard wrote the lyrics for his daughter Bandit, should he ever not be able to be there with her. But whatever the case, it's difficult not to get swept up in the song's beauty whenever you listen to it. Although of course I go back and forth practically daily, Kiss the Ring is on many days my favourite MCR song. The song is apparently about Satan, being in a band, agents and LA, according to Gerard, and if you ask me, he could have just stopped at Satan. This notion of kissing the ring comes up frequently in MCR, Panic and Fall Out Boy's works, probably due to how much ass kissing one does or doesn't have to do to survive in the industry. For me, just the imagery the song conjures of loyalty, betrayal, power vacuums and infighting is enough to have me blasting the song as loud as possible at any time. Having Make Room played at the return show for the first time was such a wonderful surprise, and to me really shows the MCR put care and attention into everything they put out. The song's name comes from the dystopian novel about overpopulation in America and the dire consequences following, including mass starvation and humanity resorting to cannibalism. While that energy is certainly brought to the song, talking about how sacrifice is required to change the world, it also talks about androgyny, drag, and gender identity. Gerard has stated in the past that he uses he/they pronouns, and that characters he has created such as Party Poison and Lola are non-binary. Gerard's little vocal touches all over this album are phenomenal, such as when they sing, it's just brilliant, and the breakdown at the end just makes you want to headbang into oblivion. The album closes with Surrender the Night and Burn Bright. Surrender has a wonderful soaring chorus and acts as a nice dark love song with beautiful vague lyric imagery. Burn, on the other hand, is about the band, but also links in with imagery of driving alone at night, like in Ambulance, which to me almost gives the song a Gotham City type feel of a never-ending night stretching out into oblivion. A wonderful note to end the album on. So while the songs that were created during this period were pretty great, they were again not what the band was looking for. Whether this contributed to whatever caused the rift between Bob Breyer and the rest of the band, I'm not sure, but on March 3rd, 2010, Frank announced that Bob had left the band on MCR's website. They wished him the best of luck, and the only semi-official word on why he left was that apparently there was some kind of argument. Now I want to stress before we continue that everything here is simply rumours, but many fans have speculated that the reason he left, or was kicked out of the band, was specifically because of bad blood he had with Mikey. Mikey was going through a difficult period during this time, going through a divorce with his wife and subsequently starting a new relationship. Due to the closeness of the new relationship starting and the old one ending, many people at the time believed he cheated, even though they had been separated for a while before it was publicly announced. As the fandom was in high gear Mikey's a dick mode, many found it amusing when Bob Breyer made the family breakfast tweet that now lives in MCR infamy, mocking a photo Mikey posted of him with his new girlfriend's family. Due to the disturbingly positive reaction to the post at the time, Bob continued to drag out the joke until the spell it had people under snapped when he commented it on a post about Mikey's then recent sobriety. Now, people don't normally get kicked out of bands because of some dodgy tweets, but this could portray some further issues that were happening within the band at the time. Furthermore, since then, Breyer has been primarily bitter towards his time in the band. In an exclusive interview he did for the 10th anniversary to the Black Parade, he talked about his memories of the band, and I kid you fucking not, even managed to sneak the phrase family breakfast in there. He states that he doesn't have any Mycam items in his house, and has sold the last of his drum kits from the era on eBay, closing the book on his drumming days in his words. Since his departure, Bob continued to work behind the scenes and tours for a few bands before retiring from music in 2014, when he apparently became a real estate agent, but has also apparently raced cars, opened and closed a wood sign shop, and been a supporter of numerous dog rescue charities. But the rest of the band would find themselves re-enthused and focused on their next potential project after another song yet again managed to bring them together.
Will you take me with you?
The first song written after the conventional weapons sessions was the lead single of what would become Danger Days, The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys. Na na na, na 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 na, you get the idea. After that, other songs such as Vampire Money, Planetary Go, and Sing seemed to come naturally to them, and they knew they were onto something. What they ended up creating was completely in line with their track record of explosive and expansive concept albums. However, this time with a twist. It had a goddamn positive outlook. The band traded in their black clothes and eyeliner for neon clothes and more different coloured eyeliner. The album's story, told across the songs, promotional material, comics and more, is set in the post-apocalyptic year of 2019, and I mean, one off ain't bad. In the final days of the Helium Wars, and shortly after the disappearance of Australia, the mega company Better Living Industries unveils Battery City, which becomes the capital of what's left of America. The Killjoys, a ragtag group of Californian desert dwellers, seek to overthrow the omnipotent company which has brainwashed the city's entire population with pills promoted by Mousecat, a Mickey Mouse ripoff that does promotional transmissions, and enforced by an army of enforcers, scarecrows and Draculoids. While the Killjoys' mission of liberation seems to be rather heroic, the way they go about accomplishing their mission, Gerard says, is intentionally morally ambiguous and leads to much betrayal and violence throughout the story. The band posted a teaser trailer for the album on September 17th, 2010, titled Art is the Weapon, introducing the fandom to the new world for the first time. Due to the positive reaction to the trailer and the song playing over it, Na 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 would become the album's first single, and elements from the trailer would be used in its music video. The album itself is to me equal to the Black Parade in the quality of its execution musically and in the story it tells, so let's dive in. Look Alive Sunshine is a voiceover introduction done masterfully by Dr. Death-Defying, the underground DJ who helps the Killjoys in their fight against Better Living Industries. The pure poetic words of the monologue to me are almost as impactful as a well-placed G-note. Na 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 is our formal, informal introduction to the Killjoys and the world they inhabit. Again, the music video is almost inseparable from the song, as we see another day in the life of the fabulous bunch as they party, drink juice while they're killing because it's fucking delicious, and ferry the mysterious girl, who is said to be the one who can liberate the whole of Battery City. Fittingly as an intro to the characters, the song emulates the Na 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 Batman intro of the 1960s version, and screeches along with possibly the greatest guitar riff ever written. The video is filled with amazing details which make it understandable why many people wish it was made into a feature-length film. Even without the comic fleshing out the world a bit, just the characters of Fungool, Jetstar, Cobra Kid and Party Poison, and Courson his Draculoids make you imagine hours of adventure where they are a Saturday morning cartoon or an action figure line. There's also a cheeky Panic at the Disco Pretty Odd style reference to their previous album, with the Black Parade jacket wearing skeleton buried in the sand, showing once and for all that the band is ready to move headstrong into their new era. At the end of the video, the Killjoys are bested by Courson and his men and they kidnap the girl, leading into the Sing music video. Originally named Trans AM after the Killjoys' car, Bulletproof Heart is a wonderful shot through the heart with love. The song is a fan favourite with good reason. It's catchy and powerful with a chorus that puts a great twist on the Killer's song Jenny Was a Friend of Mine. The song was going to be the lead single, with its original single art having even been leaked beforehand, but was replaced by Na Na Na. It ended up as the fifth single and was still intended for a long time to have a music video, but was eventually cut due to budget issues. Much like the regenerative factor I was rambling on about earlier, Gerard envisioned that after the Killjoys met their end in a second music video, that they would simply regenerate like in a video game, so they would never really die, which I think is a brilliant idea. This potentially solves the problem of diverging canons for the story we'll get into later. Sing is a bit of a polarising song for the fandom, as it is very melodic and has very little rock influence. I personally really enjoy it, and I think it's inevitable that MCR are going to continue to experiment with their sound and never create the same thing twice. Due to its more mainstream nature, the song was a hit outside the band's usual listener base, even being covered on the show Glee in America. The song was the third single off the album, and its music video followed on from where Na 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 left off, with the Killjoys storming Battery City in order to retrieve the girl from the clutches of Course and the Madam Director of Battery City. And can I just say, after watching crummy little 480p videos of the band all this time, it's wonderful to see the band, the gorgeous lens flares, and that shot of the Draculoid reaching for the alarm button in crisp HD. For a non-actor, Gerard especially does some great work while not saying anything at all, such as when he hugs the girl after saving her and senses Course's presence. The video has a director's cut which clarifies a few things about the ensuing shootout that are a little more ambiguous in the original video. Party Poison is taking down Draculoids left and right when they come to realise that they are all in fact human. Some of them are their friends, such as Cherry Cola, who is played by Gerard's wife Lindsay's band Mindless Self-Indulgence frontman, the delightfully named Jimmy Urine. Nevertheless, this moment of realisation causes Course to get the upper hand and kill Party Poison. Dr. D and Showpony arrive in their van to get the girl out of there, and Cobra Kid, Fun, Ghoul and Jetstar all sacrifice themselves so they can escape. The rest of the story we will get into later on. Planetary Go is MCR's first foray into the more dance-oriented hyper-Japanese electronic music, and it is fantastically frenetic in all aspects. The lyrics stress how short life is and how you can't wait around or you're going to miss out, calling back to the urgency of some of the songs on conventional weapons. Gerard described their creative process for the song, stating that they turned off all the lights, sat down, brought out the strobe light and got to work. The song was the fourth single, and since they ran out of money they did another performance video, but they managed to make it something special nevertheless. The small crowd manages to make enough noise and jump hard enough that they could be a group triple their size, as the band too has the time of their lives. The second single, The Only Hope for Me Is You, asks a simple but powerful question of will you be here with us through thick and thin. The song incorporates a thumpy synthy beat, as with the rest of the album's great production, and has a generally uplifting feel to it. Jetstar and Cobra Kid, Traffic Report, has Dr. D checking in to inform the listeners that the titular characters have been ghosted. Again, this discrepancy between the album and the music video can either be interpreted as two separate versions of the same story, or as an example of how the Killjoys just brushed death off like a small inconvenience. Party Poison was originally titled Death Before Disco, as it was one of the few tracks on the album along with Bulletproof Heart and The Only Hope for Me Is You that were created during the conventional weapons era and carried over. The song has a fantastic spoken word section at the start and end, done by a friend of the band named Eri, that sets the tone for the chaotic anti-party song that is to follow. Despite it being one of the most party-oriented songs on the album, the lyrics ironically decry people who only party and kill themselves by sleeping in instead of working to achieve something. How fitting of MCR to say, yeah, partying is cool, but so is hard work. Right guys? Save Yourself or Hold Them Back is a super underrated song off the album with a killer chorus that is phenomenally empowering. The song is just a riot or a gunfight set to music. It's fantastic. Scarecrow has been linked to the Danger Days universe in a number of ways, most obviously with the title being a reference to the Scarecrow classification of better living industry and forces, but also with its lyrical content being the dropping of an atomic bomb which contributed to the desolation of the desert surrounding Battery City. The song is again a bit different for the band, more slower and haunting with a wonderful murky atmosphere. Compared to everything that they had previously done, Summertime is such a wonderful departure. I love Gerard's heartfelt ode to the time he spent over the summer before they were married with his wife Lindsay Way. The song lyrics reference notes that Gerard and Lindsay wrote on their arms and necks before concerts to respond to each other, such as the brilliant chorus line. Destroyer is both a fantastic drum-led song about faith in oneself and also a song about the Destroyer robot god in the Killjoy universe, which the robotic inhabitants of Battery City worship and believe will come to set them free one day. The song has the iconic moaning in the post-chorus that has made even the straightest young man question himself just for a moment. The Kids from Yesterday is a favourite of all the band members off the album, as it is a very personal song for them about accepting that they are growing up and reflecting on their life and career. It is the sixth single off the album and had an accompanying compilation video of all their best moments. Goodnight Dr. Death is the last check-in from our DJ friend Dr. D. He reminds us to keep running before signing off with the United States national anthem. A large blaring distortion noise wakes you up from all the patriotism for the end credit song of the album. Vampire Money fucks. The song opens brilliantly with a reference to Ballroom Blitz by Sweet, as Gerard checks all the band members are ready to go before blasting into a fantastic punk number. The song was primarily written as a response to when they were asked to write a song for the Twilight franchise. They turned down the offer, noting that none of them had even read the books, and not even getting in on that vampire money that everybody wants could sway them. Apart from the songs from the conventional weapons era, the album has a couple of B-sides, including the not too remarkable We Don't Need Another Song About California and the phenomenal 0%, which I wish had found a home on conventional weapons because it is again one of my favourite songs they've ever done, with a pace that could flatten a building and a fuck the system attitude. As alluded to, after the release of the album and the cancellation of a third music video, Gerard developed a 6-part comic book series based off the album. The last part of the overarching story focused on the character of the girl and the followers of the now deceased Killjoys that remain in the desert. The comic is the perfect mix of thoughtful and exciting, with some fantastic artwork and poetic writing. I won't spoil the whole thing because it's definitely worth a read if you can get your hands on it, but it brings a fitting conclusion to the overarching story of the conflict between better living industries and the desert outlaws. In 2020, Gerard announced a soft reboot of the concept with a new series titled The True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys, National Anthem. Almost as if taking place in a parallel universe, the main Killjoy group is made up of different cast of equally interesting characters, and the world takes on a slightly different form. The series is again well worth a read and has some very topical points to make about today's politics, and also features some really great trans representation. The band didn't want to play characters on tour for Danger Days, put on a show and antagonise the audience like they did with the Black Parade, so instead with the Killjoys envisioned what MCR would sound like in 2019. Along with the World Contamination tour, they continued to release more promotional content from their YouTube channel, such as a brilliant listening party hosted by Dr. D, which had some more wonderfully poetic monologues and psychedelic visuals for all the songs. They really went all out with it, and other stuff, so it's not a surprise that eventually the money dried up a bit. The band also offered the California 2019 edition of the album, which featured an exclusive EP, a 48-page book titled Art is the Weapon, one of 4 Killjoy prop ray guns, and a matching mask. The EP contained 3 songs by the fictional band The Mad Gear and the Missile Kid. The band is what the Killjoys would be listening to in the Danger Days world, and there are flyers for the band in the video, and they play a role in the comic book series. The EP is short, fast and loud, opening with FTWWW, Fuck This Whole Wide World, which is just crazy, and then moving into Masters of Ravencroft, which is even crazier, and was on the set list for the return show but not played, and finally ending with Black Dragon Fighting Society, which was written by Gerard on guitar and kick-started the EP's recording session, when they were in a creative rut between Conventional Weapons and Danger Days. There were actually plans to make a full-length album for the band over the course of 5 days, which the band would then play in clubs, but unfortunately it did not come to fruition. Now, we all know what's coming next, but before we get into the darkest chapter in MCR history, let's remember that these wonderful guys denied doing a song for Twilight, but performed the song Every Snowflake's Different Just Like You on American kids show Yo Gabba Gabba. The song has a wonderful message of encouraging kids to embrace what makes them unique and special. Unfortunately, however, it seemed like all this positivity wasn't resonating as strongly with fans at the time as the darker themes of the Black Parade, and Gerard decided if that's what they want, then we'll go even darker. Let's see how you like that. The Paper Kingdom, or MCR5 as it is known in the fandom, was to be the band's next album recorded in their new workspace they had created especially for it, and future projects in LA. The concept behind the record was morbid. A group of parents gathered in a support group because they've all lost children in a horrible way, who would imagine their children fighting an evil witch in a forest to deal with their grief. The band had started meeting with Colleen Atwood again to work on some designs. They eventually concluded that all the joy was gone, and that the album was once again causing them severe depression. The only song that was released from the album was Fake Your Death on the Greatest Hits collection, but apparently sounded quite different to anything else on the album. Jared has said that he might do the story as a book sometime, and there are some similarities in lyrics in his solo works in the songs How It's Going to Be and Pinkish to the album's concept, but apart from that it remains completely unknown what was on there.
I think we better split up. We better split up. I think we better split up. Let's split up. We'll split up here. First thing we better do is split up.
Jared posted an open letter called A Vigil on Birds and Glass,